Hello everyone, my name is Denise. I'm a Catholic counselor. Today I'll be talking about the topic of anger. Okay, so when it comes to temperaments, I think I'm mostly phlegmatic, which means that I like peace. I don't want to do much. I just want to stay around and slack around whenever possible. But the secondary temperament is definitely choleric, which means that I'm also prone to anger. So hence anger is a sin that I grapple with, not something I'm super proud of. Okay, but recently I was just like scrolling through my older Medium articles, and then I just had sudden feeling of gratefulness for my younger self who wrote an article about anger. So I'm just going to read out a small little excerpt, not from my own writing, but from a Bible passage that I was quoting at that time. It comes from Sirach, chapter 27 to chapter 28. Okay. Wrath and anger are hateful things, yet the sinner hugs them tight. The vengeful will suffer the Lord's vengeance, for he remembers their sins in detail. Forgive your neighbor's injustice, then when you pray, your own sins will be forgiven. Could anyone nourish anger against another and expect healing from the Lord? Could anyone refuse mercy to another like himself? Can he seek pardon for his own sins? If one who is but flesh cherishes wrath, who will forgive his sins? Remember your last days, set enmity aside. Remember death and decay and cease from sin. Think of the commandments, hate not your neighbor. Remember the Most High's covenant and overlook faults. So in this very short passage, there are a few verbs used in relation to anger. They include nourish anger, hugs them tight. Hateful things hugs them tight, cherishes wrath. So instead of we are, I think I heard this from a podcaster. He says that we are Christians. Humans, actually all humans, not only Christians, are built in the image of God. So we are like engines that run best on the fuel of love. However, there are some of us who choose to hug anger tightly, to nourish our anger, and to cherish wrath. Okay? So that's of course not good, because our actions then will be like our engines will be running on the fuel of anger, which is not good, not healthy, not for us, not for all the side effects and the ripples that we leave in the environment after our anger explodes. Okay, so anger, I think under St. Thomas, is placed as a passion, one of our passions. It's not necessarily bad, because anger is like something that you do not like visits you and incites you for vengeance, to correct a wrong, something like that. So it's not entirely bad, because sometimes it requires for you to use this anger together with the virtue of charity for fraternal correction. Your brother or your client or your friend, your family member did something wrong, and you need to correct them lovingly, so that they do not keep groveling and spiral down further. So anger is not too bad, but what I can tell you about it, at least from a person with a weird temperament like me, phlegmatic and choleric, is that after a while it's so draining and so tiring. It's very energy draining, this anger thing. That sometimes when it takes so much energy for me to wanna do one of those fraternal correction thing, or crisis management, or to stand my ground and be firm, draw those boundaries well. At least it was very hard at first, now it gets easier. But let's say if the anger stretches out for a few days, I just burn out. It's very tiring physiologically for me. So let's talk about how it gets presented, like in counseling, from listening to stories. Like sometimes, I'm not saying that people do not have legitimate reasons to be very angry. Sometimes when you hear their stories, it's really horrific, Like maybe they were cheated on by their partner, or maybe they weren't given the care that they needed, and hence it led to the death of some people. So all these are very egregious wrongs that might take years to totally forgive, or might just haunt you forever. You'll be struggling with unforgiveness for your whole life. But I have seen how it has grown in a person. Like maybe the husband had an affair 20 years ago, but she couldn't forgive it. So for 20 years, this anger has festered inside her soul and has grown into this resentment monster. And it leads also to it towards the personality. Like maybe originally the person is very kind, forgiving, very agreeable, but after a while, because she has nursed the anger for so long, she becomes very disagreeable. And because she's always condemning that person who has betrayed her 20 years ago, she also develops a form of self-righteousness and a form of pride, and a form of victimization, the victim role she has sat in it for too long. And I think one of the most important and most deleterious things that could happen is that it prevents the person from seeing the other party in context. For example, in 20 years, right, a little baby can grow into almost like a full-grown adult. A person could change radically in 20 years as well. In fact, he changes moment to moment. We're always changing. So context is so important. So when we are angry with a trespass that's against us, we so-called crystallize that person in that point of offense and don't allow them to grow. At least in our head, we hold it very tightly, that original form 20 years ago, instead of thinking about how he is or she is today in the here and now. And so remember, like I was talking previously about in another video about like a magic pocket at the back of our head, where we store our nurturing voices, with the voice of God, the voice of Mother Mary, the voice of your counselor or your parent or your spouse that's always there supporting you, whispering encouraging words and giving you resilience, co-regulating. Okay, so that is the same also. There could be another magic pocket somewhere around that is storing up that memory of you being betrayed. And because it's always there nagging and reminding you that the world is not such a good place, it's a dangerous place, it's a place where people betray you. So it just, maybe your personality was at first very considerate, very agreeable, but it becomes with time festering into a very disagreeable, suspicious person, because you couldn't let go of the anger 20 years ago. And the person who has trespassed against you, maybe he's still an asshole, or maybe he has already repented and become a saint, or it could be anything in that spectrum of still an asshole or become a saint, or he's oscillating, but living his own life. But for you, or for me, as I'm holding on to my anger, I just become more and more distorted, very different from the version of Denise that God has intended for me to be. Okay, so certain remedies, I think I would propose two. First is detachment, and second is empathy. Okay, detachment is like remember, anger is incited when, firstly, something that you love is being hurt. For example, I have a son whom I really love, and then if somebody bullies him, I will be very angry with the person who bullies him. It's very natural. Okay, so the more attached I am to my son, the more angry I would be, and the likelihood of me spiraling down and wanting to take revenge is very high. But if I have a certain detachment from that, and I'm also willing to offer, like in Jordan Peterson's word, to be a good mother is you need to offer your son up to the suffering of this world to become a real good man, like Mother Mary offering Jesus on the cross. So if I could have that kind of detachment and allow God's will to be done, and not be overly protective or be a devouring mother, it could remedy that. So son is very visceral, right? But it could be other things. It could be like your career. Someone came in to threaten your career and you're angry with that person, you want to take revenge. Same thing, a detachment from your career and surrendering it in the hands of God can help you to lessen the anger. The second thing is empathy. Sometimes I use psychodrama for my individual therapy. So I'll put the person that you're angry with on the chair, empty chair. Then I'll put maybe let's say if you're a Christian or a Catholic, Mother Mary or Jesus on the other chair. Then I'll let them have a conversation. And you realize that if your understanding, let's say, of Jesus and Mother Mary is pretty good, you realize that it's very compassionate. That Mother Mary and Jesus are essentially very compassionate to the sinner, compassionate to the person who has trespassed against you, and to you as well for nursing the anger over all these years. So as you develop empathy for the person who has trespassed against you, this anger will also be loosened up. And then once you're freed from it, which is like say the magic pocket of all the toxicity is now empty, you'll find that you're more relaxed. Your whole nervous system is calmed down, and you generally emanate a more relaxed and steady kind of disposition. Okay, there's some people who have been through a lifetime of trauma or difficulties, and their nervous system is very charged, so they have tics. And to use a very worldly term, it's just not such a good look. Like at work, the boss want to promote them, but they just have that nervous energy, and then always when you're talking to them, they got all those tics coming out on their faces. It's generally not so confidence inspiring, as opposed to a person who has very calm, regulated nervous system, and generally looks like he's very stable and in control. That person generally inspires more confidence, right? So you might think that your anxiety is keeping you safe and helping you guard against all the bad people of this world, but it might have the opposite effect. It might cause you to be this nervous ball of energy that people just like, that don't exactly inspire confidence. So even if it's not for God, if you're just doing it to succeed in the world, maybe it's time to let go of your anger. Okay, so that's all for today's video. To reiterate, anger, yes, is a sin. Is it justified? Maybe for a time. But if you hold on to it for too long, it can really breed resentment and lead to the sin of anger, and just distorts your personality, making you not the fully glorious version of yourself that God intended. How do you overcome it? Through detachment and through having empathy for the person who has trespassed against you. Ultimately, you do not want to hug anger tightly. You do not want to cherish your wrath. And what's the third one? And you do not want to nourish your anger. Because people who hug hateful things, nourish anger and cherish wrath, that actually takes away from the ability to hug human beings, nourish human beings, and cherish human beings. It's quite funny. If you really want to be a good, loving, kind person who can cherish, hug, and nourish humans, then you cannot do that for anger. Okay, with that said, remember, anger, if it's just for a time, so that it gives you enough energy to dispense a form of fraternal correction, that is love, and that's okay. Okay, so that's all for today's video. I hope that it's been helpful. And I will probably put the link to my original article down below so you can read it. Sometimes, right, you know, as we grow older and older, as I'm growing older and older, I look back at my earlier articles. I was like, I can't even remember that's me, and I wrote that. It's quite funny. Yeah, I faced that like at certain points of my life, like, when I was 30, I compared myself when I was 20, and now I'm approaching 40, I compare myself when I'm in my early 30s. So many differences. Okay, sorry, that's another topic for another day. Okay, I hope all this has been helpful to you. Thank you so much, everyone. God bless.